America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and I'm going to give you a little evening show tonight, and I'll tell you that with Nixon consolidating all of the explicitly white nationalist vote in the Republican Party, to be a Democrat, you didn't really have to worry about being on the wrong side of history. And what that meant is that Democrats became intellectually lazy with respect to their arguments for why they should have the right to govern. So I'll make the argument again. With Nixon, the post-civil rights Southern strategy, which consolidated all of the both implicit and explicitly white supremacist sentiment, or a good chunk of it, that consolidated that sentiment in the Republican Party, you no longer had to be particularly rigorous or thoughtful to be a Democrat and worry about being on the right side of history. You might not always win elections, but you could always point to the other team that may have won the election as being the bad guy. Right? The problem is that easy virtue made Democrats a little bit lazy with respect to actually thinking through what it meant to govern justly. And so now we live in an era of Democrats who are bad at governing justly and are not particularly good at democracy. This is why, Nancy Pelosi never has to debate her. She spent, 30 years, 25 years in she got elected in 87, so closer to 30. In the Congress without ever taking a primary debate. Jim Clyburn doesn't have to take primary debates. Like, we're just bad at doing democracy. The Democratic Party can sue for the right to forswear their own laws in order to allow elites to pick their candidates. So in many ways, the Democratic Party is bad at democracy, but they've been allowed to be bad at democracy because they were at least the non-racist party. And this is not helped by, honestly, a quality of feminism that took over the Democratic Party that naturalizes the moral superiority of women tacitly. The future is female. Women do it better, all of that stuff, which doesn't actually go at the quality of politics and democratic norms and thought that goes into the policy. It's just supposed to be taken for granted that if a woman is saying it, it's good. And that's not particularly great for political thinking. And it's one of the reasons why I honestly have an easier time both getting airtime and fostering debate in conservative spaces than I can in democratic spaces. I've said this before, shouldn't be a surprise. Every now and then I get invited to do radio shows. When I go on the Fox affiliate, it's always surprisingly well received, and we go back and forth, and I'm invited back, I think, pretty earnestly. It's not a problem. When I go on the NPR affiliate, things get a little bit dicey because invariably I'll get invited on, and then the night before I'm supposed to go on, or maybe 2 days before I'm supposed to go on, I get uninvited. It's happened multiple times. Maybe someone did a Google search on me and found out that I said some things that might tick off the underwriters, whatever, but they don't respect the process or the ideas in the same way. And in theory, I would actually agree with the NPR people more. I might not like them more, but I'll agree with their politics more. But the Fox News people will be more willing to mix it up. And that is not... I don't think that's an accident. I think Democrats have been ethically lazy with the easy moral virtue that goes with not being the white supremacist party. But that might not be enough, right? You can't just keep suspending laws. You can't just keep being casual. The non-democratic Biden's, the non-Biden Democrats organized to forswear having a primary, and then Biden himself just kind of gives his son a blanket pardon. It's a weird kind of pardon because for a while it was like a pardon for any past things or future things that he would do. So it's like, this man is above the law now. And we're not having the quality of discussion we need to have for what that means. Right? That Crime Bill Joe can just give a blank a blank check to his crackhead son. And Hunter Biden is a whole crackhead, which is a problem. But like there are a lot of black men whose like entire families were destroyed for not having Biden as their daddy. So we need to actually think about what that means, just as part of a trend and not a one-off with Democratic politics that like we're just kind of okay with it. We're just kind of okay with it. And, you know, the fact that Biden will suspend the norms and guardrails of democracy for his son, but he wouldn't do it for like to fight anything else. You know, I remember the parliamentarian was killing ideas because Biden didn't want to go on the other side of the parliamentarian. So we just have to ask ourselves, do Republicans do democracy better? I mean, they don't have superdelegates in their primary. This is why Trump was able to actually successfully launch a takeover of their primary. They might have a more open media environment. It's possible they have there might be a bigger tent party where more different kinds of ideas can be debated, because it's not clear that the Democrats are better at that kind of robust democracy in terms of being actually like tolerant of views that you might not agree with, that the people in power don't agree with. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to go to chat right now and talk about it. Maybe I'm wrong, but the party that actually is open to is open to democratic debate might not be the Democratic Party. And this is new. I think it's growing this way. I think it's growing this way, and it's been like a trend for the last 10 years, pretty much since gay marriage. When the Republicans like stopped fighting gay marriage, they stopped being the party that was obviously bad on everything. They just became the party that you just disagreed with, right? And it's okay to be a party that that exists that you disagree with, but you still have to actually contend with them. You have to actually like make the arguments. But the Democrats kept living as if they don't have to make arguments anymore because obviously they were right. Well, it's not obvious that you were right. And I think in a lot of ways the Democrats were wrong, right? Like the working class doesn't move over to Trump's GOP by accident. It's because Democrats need help. But what blinds them to their need for this help is the easy virtue and the assumption that they're always going to be on the moral side of the argument. So even if they lose, it's not because they were wrong, it's because the other people are stupid. But no, it's not. The other people aren't stupid. It's like you didn't make the argument in a compelling way. And no amount of money, and remember, Democrats have been outspending Republicans for the last few election cycles. No amount of money is going to change the fact that people aren't buying what you're selling because you might not be selling the right thing, right? So this idea that guys like Joe Rogan are the enemy, I haven't seen a lot of Joe Rogan, but I was surprised with what I saw because he actually seems like an open guy. He actually like wants to hear good arguments and isn't really that opinionated or full of himself. So if I had to sit down with like Judy Woodruff or Joe Rogan for a meaningful interview, I think you'd get the more meaningful interview from a Joe Rogan than a Judy Woodruff. Judy Woodruff would get offended at my audacity to have ideas that didn't agree with her. Where Joe Rogan would be like, all right, well, let's work this out. Let's hash this out. And I think it would be both a better conversation for the people to listen to and you know, myself for both sides if I were on Rogan instead of Woodruff, right? So this idea that, you know, Cokie Roberts is is a symbol of democracy doesn't really hold up. Doesn't really hold up. And so the Dems who squash internal debate, the Dems who put so much energy in punching left, and put so much energy in punching left, which I think might make the party almost unreasonable if they become so comfortable losing elections and gaining money. If they can continue to lose elections but keep the elite donors giving to them, they're not going to win elections because they think they're right and they think that history is going to absolve them. And as long as they keep getting paid and as long as they think history is going to absolve them ethically or morally, then they're going to keep this up. And that's not going to be particularly good for anyone. And it's just not true that history is going to absolve them. They're actually wrong. Like, to get these people to even admit that they were just wrong on Ukraine. Like, even Israel and Palestine might be a complicated argument. I think they were wrong on Israel and Palestine also. I think we should have tied conditions to the sanctions, not just ceasefire. You need to secularize Israel or / Palestine. You need to secularize the nation. There is no Jewish nation. You need to secularize the nation as a condition of its national defense, because it doesn't have a right to exist as an ethno-state. No ethno-state has a right to exist. It may have a legitimate right to exist as a real democracy where there's equality under the law, not like one set of laws for one people, one set of courts for one people, and one set of laws for another people. No, that's not what we should be saying has a right to exist. That does not have a right to exist. Right, but Ukraine? Democrats were just wrong on Ukraine. If Trump were won in 2020, like, I don't know, maybe a few 100,000 Ukrainians would still be alive, and Russians. And that's not a small deal. Like, the idea that Democrats are automatically right is lazy, and it's just not empirically true. It would be more true if this were in the 90s or the 80s or, a different era. But as we become better on the race question, and as Democrats become worse and as Republicans become better, then people need to actually make the arguments for their case. They can't just assume easy moral virtue like Democrats like to assume. Democrats just walk into a room and assume that they're right, like ethically, morally. So they don't have to win elections anymore. They just assume that they're morally right. And you know who else likes to do that? A lot of white women. So it's abetted by a kind of cultural feminism that always assumes, that naturalizes like being right. So you don't have to make the argument, and you shouldn't have to submit to arguments because you're just naturally right. By the way, if you appreciate what I'm doing, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick down on $5, $15, or $50 a month, and I'll keep doing what I'm doing. I'm thinking, I don't want to have to do this, but I'm thinking that I might just keep doing the clips for free, but then put the whole show behind a wall. But I don't want to have to do that because I want people to have all of the news. But that means more people need to become subscribers. More people need to become subscribers, because I'm not I kind of want this as a public good, but it needs to kind of pay for itself. And honestly, it needs to kind of pay for my very meager lifestyle. So go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com if you appreciate what I'm doing, and kick down $5, $15, or $50. I said for this week, if I get an extra $2,000 this week, people want me to do a nighttime call-in show. I don't know if I want to deal with all the logistics of that endeavor, but if enough people, if I get an extra $2,000 this week, I will get the software, get all the stuff. We'll do a call-in show. It won't be every night, but a few times a week. Once I put the kids to bed, I'll hop on. We'll hash it out at the call-in show in addition to the regular stuff. All right, but I need to see you guys being willing to put your money in your mouth and then we'll talk. Right? So it's not clear that Democrats are on the moral side, on the right side. So now they have to make arguments, but they're not really prepared to make arguments, and they don't think they should have to make arguments. And honestly, they're bad at it, right? So right now, do you really want to see Kamala Harris debate J.D. Vance? Do you really want to see that debate? Do you think that's going to be a good debate? Do you think for the Democrats? like they've lost the debate bros, and that matters. And that matters. There should be Democratic debate bros as good as the Republican ones. But the Charlie Kirks of the world and, the Nick Fuenteses of the world and all of those guys, they can actually take the debate in a way that your regular liberal can't. And because they just think that everyone should feel sorry for them. Like Democrats just assume the moral high ground with the assumption that people should feel sorry for them. When actually you need to make the case. You need to make the case why doctors and nurses and all of these people need to minister to Americans in society just because those Americans in society happen to be sick. Like, why should sickness compel other people to work for you? You need to make the argument. And I think the best argument is that everyone participates in America, and insofar as anyone works any job, they should get all of the largesse. Anyone works any job for the community, for the society, they should get all of the benefits that society offers, which includes medical care. Right? So you work any job in America, you get all of the things. And not only that, the government should operate as the employer of last resort. So everyone's guaranteed a good job. Right? So there's this idea that Democrats don't have to actually debate their vision of governments because they can assume the moral high ground because the Republicans were so bad on race for so long. But the Republicans have become less bad on race and the Democrats have become more bad on everything else. Yeah. The state of and the Democrats have become so bad on everything else that it might be okay to take the Republicans' racism in the same way that it might be okay to take, this is probably pretty controversial, the founding fathers' racism to keep in order to have a democratic nation, right? So it's not like racism is some sort of magic trump card. There are things that are worse, it's not as if the Democrats are that much better on race. It's not as if the Democrats are running on reparations. Right? And I think black people deserve reparations. Now we can get in more granular debates about this and I'd like to within the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party won't go that way. I mean, we can talk about reparations for property that's owed. We can talk about reparations for labor that's owed. I think one line that needs to be talked about, especially in 2024, 2025, is reparations for the parents you could have had. Your parents would have been better, black people. Your parents would have been better if they hadn't have had to go through the terror of Jim Crow and then spat out into market society that was targeted to give them all sorts of bad ideas about family. Right? So your parents could have been better. If you don't know how bad you probably don't know how incompetent your parents were. They just didn't know enough. And not only did they not know enough, they were still traumatized by their parents who had to deal with the Jim Crow era. Right? So your parents could have been better, and America broke your parents. America broke your parents, and that's the reason why you didn't have as good a parent as you did. And you don't know that you didn't have as good a parent as you could have because you haven't been in other functional families. Now, I will tell you that white families are screwed up too in a different way, but their kind of way screws up their kids in a way that's bad for black people. But just trust that you are owed reparations because America stole your rearing. It stole the possibility of you having good parents. One of the reasons, my own kids are on a path to be better than me in pretty much every meaningful way. And more people should be raised like I'm raising my kids and not the way I was raised. And it's not necessarily even about money and resources. It's about culture. It's not necessarily because my mom was a single nurse, so she made enough. So it's not really about money, although money would help. Black people are owed money, but you are your parents should have been better at being parents. And one of the reasons they weren't better at being parents is because they themselves weren't allowed to be parented in a way that's like not, that wasn't overdetermined by the fear of white feelings. There's a great book on this called Trouble in Mind. And what you get when you read the book is that Jim Crow parenting, parents couldn't really determine the path for their children. And like, if you can't really determine a path for your children, you're going to make all sorts of untoward decisions. Right? So, Democrats will tell you that they are the party of the college educated, but not the party of the politically curious. They are the party of the credentialed hacks. They are the party of the people who stop thinking and just kind of, they are the party of the good at school people, but not necessarily the most politically thoughtful people. The good at school people just kind of assumed that they are right because they parrot what they were told. But that might not be a quality of political legislation that leads us into the future, that creates a vibrant civil society or an appropriately responsive political sensibility. And it doesn't help that Democrats are bad parents. So liberals are bad at parenting. They aren't the greatest at civil society, and they like kind of hypocrites with respect to politics. And yet they get the most degrees, right? So like the Democratic base being a bunch of degreed hacks who aren't really politically curious, who aren't really interested in politics because they assume that they know everything that they need to know. So they aren't interested in the debate, and so that they think that they can govern by their feelings and their vibes. It's a problem. It's a problem. So Democrats and their vibe governance is not really intellectually serious, but they have all these degrees, so you can't really call them not intellectually serious. But the problem is they're not intellectually serious. They're not interested. And if you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. If you don't know that, I think it's important. Tell your kids. One of the reasons I do this show is so that you can tell your kids things that maybe they don't know. If you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. And Democrats are not actually interested in politics. Kamala Harris did not have a concern about political problems. She didn't. She wanted to run an administrative state where she didn't actually have to think politically. And yeah, she was just not interested, like I said. And if the Democrats don't figure this out, they're going to send some hack against J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance is going to wipe up the floor with him because he's going to actually think about political solutions to political problems, as long as he's not weighed down by Trump's record. And so the Democrats need to actually take, visions of governance seriously, and not just goodies, because you can promise to give away a ton of goodies, but if you don't have a vision of governance that ties it together, then it's just you trying to bribe people with stuff that's like mediocre stuff. It's like Amazon Prime Day. That's great. The Democrats are the equivalent of Amazon Prime. They're just giving away all of these knickknacks, all this crap that you don't want, but for 60% off, and then are being pissed at you for not wanting it and buying it. Like the Democrats are the Amazon Prime Day of political parties. They'll sell you all of this crap that you don't want for 60% off, and be surprised when you don't buy it. That's actually true. So like Democrats actually need like a vision of governance, not just to be giving a smorgasbord of goodies that are not really what people ask for and not for the right reasons. And we just have to understand that, like, in a deep way, that, the Democrats have been relying on easy virtue, that they could just kind of be unserious politically because they could rely on the Republicans being, racist. But the Republicans aren't sufficiently racist anymore. And, Democrats don't really believe in democracy. You can't even rely on unions anymore because something like AFT, for example, in a well-ordered world, Randy Weingarten, I feel like Randy Weingarten is president of AFT for life. How did that happen? And why isn't there pressure to get her to step down and have new elections for her position? How do you have a president for life of AFT? And these are teachers. These are people who should be thinking about democracy in a more robust way. Democrats aren't serious about democracy, so it's possible that the racist party does democracy better. And we need to figure out what that means. And it's not that Democrats aren't racist. It's that the explicitly racist party might actually do democracy better. This wouldn't be an anomaly in America because it might have been that way since the founding, right? It might have been that way since the founding. So I don't know. Thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm doing, which you should, I think you should go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. If I pick up an extra $2,000 this month, I'm going to give you a call-in show where you're going to come and we're going to hash it out. We'll do the call-in show at nighttime once I put the kids to bed. All right. Thank you for your time. And I will talk to you another time. All right, real quickly. Michael Marcel said, Trump campaigned for 4 years. Kamala campaigned for 105 days. The outcome of the election was a no-brainer. That's just not true. You could have given... Kamala Harris would have lost California in 2020. She lost because she doesn't have anything to say that'll speak to American people, American working people. She isn't convincing that she's going to protect the American economy or, do better about. When she had a chance to say, is there any break that you would have had with Joe Biden over the last 4 years? Is there anything you would have done different? She said no, she couldn't think of anything that she would have done differently. How unimaginative do you have to be to not be able to think of anything that you would have done differently in the last 4 years? You did everything right. Biden did everything right. And this is after, I think more people know that we got hosed by Zelensky. Maybe the Russian sanctions weren't the greatest idea. Maybe that, drove the Russians to create an alternative economy and now realize that they are, can function independently of the U.S. dollar. And maybe that's not the greatest model to show to China, which now is starting to realize that they can function without the U.S. dollar. And it's not that Kamala Harris was a terrible speaker. She was just politically unconcerned. She did not actually have political concern. She did not concern herself with political problems and meeting political solutions to political problems. That was never been her job. That's not necessarily her job as a DA, but she was just uninterested in solving political problems. She thought her most important contribution to the office was her being in the office. Was Obama concerned? I think Obama, he did interesting things with Cuba. I'm not a huge Obama fan. I'm not. You're gonna have to, miss me with. I don't think Obama was the greatest president. I think, I think the Democrats have been bad. I think bad, and even someone like Bill Clinton, who was actually trying to meet political problems with political solutions, he just didn't have great politics. Right? So this last 30 years of Clinton retreads isn't great not because Clinton wasn't interested in politics, he just had bad politics. Kamala's just not interested in politics. She just doesn't care about finding political problems. What about it's the economy, stupid? All right, so I had another video about the economy as a canard, a Democratic canard, because I actually think Joe Biden could have brought inflation down and he still would have lost. I actually think inflation's real, but the prices could have come down and Joe Biden could have brought them down and he still would have lost because people don't feel secure. If you bring market-based solutions to problems that come from the fundamental instability of the market, people might be better off, but they'll still be anxious and like want a change, because people don't want a market-based solution to a problem that is when the market is the problem. Right? So something like a federal job guarantee, something like you need rights-based solutions to rights-based problems, and market-based solutions to market-based problems, right? So we try to put market-based solutions to a rights-based problem, and people are still a little bit like anxious. People still don't know, even after Obamacare, they still don't know if they're going to have health care. They're tied to a job that's still like spacious because they're not guaranteed a better job with healthcare. If you were guaranteed people a good job with healthcare, they would feel okay. All right, I have to work, that's fine. If I work and I'll get healthcare, that's fine. And I don't have to kiss anybody's butt. Right? I can just do my job. Right? So I don't think it's necessarily inflation. It's generalized anxiety. But I did a different video on that. But it's important. It's important that like voices like mine are out there. And once again, if you appreciate voices like mine being out there, go to funkyacademics.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. We'll make this happen more often. But I do think it's important to address the Democrats' easy virtue. They got lazy. Nixon made the Democrats lazy by turning Republicans into the party of racists. And all Democrats had to be was not explicitly racist. To trust that even if they lost the election, they'd be on the right side of history. But it turns out that they can't even trust that they'll be on the right side of history anymore, because the Republicans aren't sufficiently racist. And the Democrats are so bad at governing that people are voting with their feet, fleeing blue states and blue areas in blue states to redder pastures, redder states and redder areas. Not just because the cost of living is cheaper, although that's no small thing, but also because liberals are bad with families. And, it's the Democrats who shut down civil society because of the pandemic. So nobody can trust Democrats with respect to virtue selling. And not only that, this is another bit of hypocrisy. The Republicans will loudly keep the nation open during the pandemic, but the Democrats will shut it down and have private parties. They'll shut it down and then have private parties because they want to have fun. Right? So the quality of virtue signaling and hypocrisy that is just up and down the Democratic Party is obnoxious. So you can't be surprised when people go to the Republicans in the face of Democrats being, a problem. Someone says, infinite free money. What's not to like? Well, inflation. People need to be productive. And I'm a fan of people being productive. So thank you for your time. I hope I kind of clarified how the party of university diplomas can also be the anti-intellectual party, because they've gotten hooked on the easy virtue of not being racist and not being sexist. But the problem is that the easy virtue of not being racist and has confused them and made them bad at democracy. Right? And once again, there's another story about the gender story, which gets me in hot water, which is why you definitely have to give. The gender story is that we've naturalized morality in women. So insofar as especially educated women in the United States become Democrats, that's another kind of part of the confluence that presumes that Democrats are going to be the moral authority in any general race, right? So if women assume that they're right because they're women, and they shouldn't have to submit to arguments or listen or actually adhere to norms of debate and reasoned discourse, because they're women, and since they're women and oppressed, they have to be right, then it's going to be a problem for, democracy. It's going to be a problem for democracy. So the better Democratic practitioners end up going to the GOP, which is a problem. So I want to save the Democratic Party or start a new third party, but you don't start a new third party by breaking off from the Democrats. You start a new third party by actually cleaving the Republicans to two, because the Democrats are so self-satisfied that they can lose and get money and still be high on their moral high ground. And so they're not changing. They're not changing. If you can lose, assume the moral high ground and still get paid, you're not going to change. You'll just become a party of scolds who do not govern. You'll become the South Carolina Democratic Party, a party of scolds who do not govern. At pretty much any level. Thank you very much. And I will talk to you about something different later this week. Peace.